so much for joining us today. To start off, could you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Oh, certainly. My name is Sharon and I'm a docent, a volunteer with the Eurasian Heritage Gallery.
Could you share with us a little more about what you do here in the Eurasian Heritage Gallery? What inspired you to become involved in this role?
Sure. I've always been involved in some form of volunteer community service, but never with my own Eurasian community. So when this opportunity came up to be trained as a docent, I thought it would be a really good chance to share my heritage and community stories with other people. So yeah, it was really fun to do that.
How long have you been in this?
I think it's almost 10 years.
Wow,
went by in a flash.
So, as a volunteer, in your opinion, what makes preserving and celebrating Eurasian heritage important in today's multicultural society in Singapore?
I think for the Eurasian community, firstly, we are a very, very small community here in Singapore. There are only about almost 19,000 of us. So, and what I found as a volunteer docent is that quite a few Singaporeans do not know that our community actually exists. So for us, it's important that we share our stories, especially since we've been around since we can even go back to the Straits Settlement. So to share those stories, and also importantly to share the contributions that our community did for the development of Singapore. And I think these stories and memories just shouldn't be forgotten. So that's why we're very passionate about passing on our experiences and our stories.
And so one of those stories are how the Eurasian community had its roots planted in Katong-Joo Chiat district.
Yeah.
So how did it come about, to have the Eurasian community plant their roots in the Katong-Joo Chiat district, and in particular, why this district in particular actually?
Oh, okay, great. Our first enclave was actually at Bras Basah Waterloo area, and that's where a lot of Eurasians had their homes. Then, of course, over time, this became overcrowded. So there was the pull and the allure of having a seaside home. So many Eurasians thought, let's go east. Of course, we're not just talking about the wealthy Eurasians who could afford the seaside villa, but there were also Eurasians who used to be fishermen, and they also came and settled and started kampongs along the seafront. So it was basically because of overcrowding. And once we came towards East Coast, I think, and Katong Road, that area, everybody felt very comfortable there. It was like, wow, another kampong for us.
So then, could you share with us about more about the places of significance in Katong-Joo Chiat to the Eurasian community and their history?
Sure. I think probably the first thing I would think of would be the Church of the Holy Family. So this is in Katong, and it's a church that is very well known by the Eurasians as well as the Peranakan community. And it started off as a little chapel, and as the community grew, there was a need for having a proper church. So the land that the church sits on now was actually donated by Eurasian, James Leonard Schroeder. So he donated this land, and because he donated the land, he got the right to name the church, which I think is only fair. Yeah. So he called it the Church of the Holy Family because of that familial, feeling within the community. And since then, the church has, of course, grown and it's been rebuilt. I think the most recent was in the 1990s. It was rebuilt because of the growing congregation. If you travel along the Katong area, I think you can't also miss St. Patrick's School.
Yes.
St. Patrick's was, it started off as a seaside resort for the brothers who were teaching in St. Joseph's Institution. Obviously, the boys must have been a real handful in SJI. So the poor brothers needed a resort to go and calm and be prayerful. So they bought this plot of land that St. Patrick sits on, which was actually very smart of the brothers at that time, because to this day they still own that land. So, and they had this little retreat for them. It was very humble. But as SJI became more and more crowded, they needed to transfer boys over to St. Patrick's. So it became a school. And it was a school for many years, and then the war came. during the Battle for Singapore, St. Patrick's was actually the scene of a lot of bloodshed, literally, yeah, because it was used as a military hospital for the Australians mainly, and it was bombed, and there were a lot of deaths seen there. After the war, during the Japanese occupation, St. Patrick's being such a big building, the Japanese took over the building and used it as one of their military headquarters. So St. Patrick's is very near and dear to a lot of Eurasian men and older men, younger men that pass through their gates. Another area I think it's interesting to mention would be the hospital, Parkway East. Now, where Parkway East sits on that plot of land used to be the clinic of Dr. Charles Pagler. And this was during World War II. And Dr. Charles Pagler, he's actually quite a well-known Eurasian figure in our community. And during the war, this clinic served to look after a lot of people who could not afford medical fees as well. And how could Dr. Charles Pagler afford to give medicine free of charge? Actually, that's a story that links back to St. Patrick's. And say, okay, if I share it with you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Because during the war, when it was a military hospital for the soldiers, the Allied forces, what they did in the school field of St. Patrick's was, before they left, they knew Singapore was going to surrender. So before they left the school, they put mines in the school field. So, yeah. And when the Japanese came over to use the building, they thought the school field looked really untidy. They sent 2 grass cutters to go and cut the grass in the school field that was mined unbeknownst to them. And of course the mines went off, and these these grass cutters were badly hurt. So they rushed them over to the nearest clinic, which was Dr. Charles Pagler. And he managed to save their lives. So when the Japanese officers heard of this, they thought like, that's the guy we've got to go to if we need any medical attention. So the Japanese officers would go and see Dr. Charles Pagler, and they had money. They could pay him for his services. And what he earned from them, he could buy more medicine to serve those who could not pay him. And the group that he really helped were the comfort women. They were prostitutes and comfort women living in the Joo Chiat Katong area, Onan Road, and also on Joo Chiat Road. And these women were often brutalized. So they would take a trishaw, go to Dr. Pagler, who would help them out and who would tend to whatever the injuries were. So it was a rather dark time at that time, dark period, but yeah, it's all part of the Katong-Joo Chiat history. Maybe on a happier note, let's move down the road. And maybe the last little building I'd like to share with you would be about the Red House Bakery. It's kind of iconic as you travel down the East Coast Road. You see this very beautiful old building, the Red House Bakery, and that was owned by a Jewish man called Jim Baker. So Jim Baker was a baker. So I thought, wow, so serendipitous, right?
Born to be a baker.
That's right. So he started the Red House Bakery, and later he sold it off. And the bakery was well known for its Swiss rolls and its curry puffs, but it was also a dating place for a lot of Eurasians in the community. I guess maybe they weren't that many places to go, so Red House kind of looked a bit fancy. So they would go to Red House, and parents who wanted to matchmake their children would bring their Eurasian children there. And have the Swiss roll, the curry puff, okay? And they even had like matchmaking screens. I don't know why they wanted to screen it out, make it so private. But that's where they would introduce their daughter to a potential, husband. And yeah, so cute, right?
Yeah.
And after they had their coffee and Swiss roll, they would cross the road and go over to Roxy Square, which was then Roxy Cinema. And you get to see a movie. This was like in the 1930s, where they had movie cinemas and things like that. Yeah, so quite cute. And we're so glad that the building is still there.
So, on the topic of food, we understand that the Eurasian community is indeed quite small in Singapore. So, would you like to share more or shed some light on traditional Eurasian dishes or the Eurasian cuisine that is commonly enjoyed, like in households or maybe perhaps in the public as well, if there are certain places you could recommend?
Oh, sure, yeah, okay. Yeah, I think, being Singaporean, we have to talk about food. And I think the Eurasian dinner table, is really it's the best way to see the mix of European and Asian, because that's our heritage. It was either the Portuguese, the Dutch, British, and the other Europeans, and our Asian mothers who were like Malays, Chinese, Indians. So it's this blending of influence that you really see in Eurasian food. I have to talk, of course, about the most iconic dish that probably everybody has heard of, but that's devil's curry. And that's the wrong way of saying it. Actually, it should be called curry debal, because debal actually means leftovers in Portuguese Cristão. So it was a dish made up of leftovers, and it was usually after Christmas. The next day was Boxing Day, and you had a lot of uneaten maybe meats. So you would put this together into this really fiery hot curry. So it was using the leftovers debal. And because it was so hot and fiery, and it has a dash of vinegar and mustard, so it's hot and sourish, Also to kind of hide in case anything was going a bit off. So it became known as being a curry that was like hot as hell. So a lot of people said, wow, it's like devil, curry devil. So it became known as, locally as curry devil, but it's actually curry debal. Yeah. And another dish that goes along with Christmas and celebrations would be suji cake. That's one of my favorites, actually. Also, so suji cake made of, a lot of butter and eggs, and it was a celebration cake because it was an expensive cake to produce, to make. You needed a lot of egg yolks and butter and almonds and semolina, of course. And this was a recipe that came from Sri Lanka, actually. Yeah. So those were probably two of the most iconic dishes, but if you look at the everyday food that we would eat in the Eurasian household, things like stews were very popular because you could cook a big dish to serve a big family quite simply. But the Eurasian stew would be a bit different because it's more of a British dish, but to make it a little bit more Asian, our mothers and grandmothers would start the dish by using cloves and cinnamon and star anise. So it's that inclusion of spices that sort of changed the flavor a little bit. So you see a lot of blending in Eurasian food that way.
That's really, really yummy.
Yeah, I must also mention we also always eat rice every day. And this is a must-have, you must have sambal belacan somewhere on your table. So you see that blending, because quite often we get visitors asking, what do you eat? And we eat rice, because we're Singaporean.
So the sambal belacan also goes along with the devil's curry.
Oh yes, if you like, yes. You want that extra cake, please do.
So on that topic of the Eurasian culture in Singapore, what are some notable cultural practices or customs observed by the Eurasian community in Singapore?
Right, I think each family probably has a little tradition of their own. I mean, being Christians and Catholics, we celebrate Easter and Christmas, and now it's the Lenten period for us. So I think when Christmas comes around, every family might have their own little traditions. We did a Christmas tour, and before we did that tour, we did some research into Eurasian families and what did they do. And we were surprised that although we did a lot of things similar, like they would always be curry debal for Christmas, there were other things that were a bit different, like we would put up a nativity scene with, the scene of Bethlehem in your home. But in some homes, they would not put the little figurine of baby Jesus in the nativity scene until after midnight mass on Christmas Day, because that's to show that that's the coming of Jesus. We were waiting for that moment, and then they put the figurine in. Yeah, other families might have traditions like Christmas Eve dinner where they would have a special prayer or lighting of certain candles. So it's nice that every family has a little bit of a unique way of celebrating Christmas.
And it's also like highly symbolic, right?
Yes,
Rather than
that's
just
right.
like decorating the Christmas tree.
True, yeah. Recently, I also discovered this tradition. I heard from one of my friends. She said, you know, after we decorate the Christmas tree, we toast it with a glass of wine or anything that we have handy. No, that's kind of a fun way, kind of like reward the effort. So in my family, we started taking on that tradition. So I tell my children, put up the tree, you get to toast it afterwards. So we all drink wine and like toast the tree. Christmas is on the way.
Then could you share with us more about like the traditional music and dance forms that are part of your heritage? Could be Christmas or non-Christmas related.
Yeah. I think this love of music is really part of the Eurasian DNA. And I think it comes down from the Portuguese and the love of dance and folk songs. So you find also a lot of Eurasians are also involved in music. You find there are a lot of Eurasian musicians as well. One of the most iconic, I would say, Eurasian songs would be the Jinky Nona. Jinky Nona is actually a Portuguese folk song, and it means fair maiden. So it's like a bit of a courtship song and dance, and the dance is the branyo, and it's very it's really a old-fashioned style of folk dance that they would do during weddings or birthdays, you know. And it's something that we teach groups that come in for our tours. So it's really fun to see the little ones having a good time to the Jinky Nona, and kind of like, and then we tell them like, okay, can you remember the word? What is it, Jinky Nona? So it's fun that it's something that sinks into their memory as a dance that they learned. Yeah.
Sure. Well, then could you enlighten us about like the wider Eurasian community, either individuals or families in Singapore? What history and impact have they made on Singapore?
Oh, okay, sure. Well, first, the most notable Eurasian would be Joseph Schooling.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And Joseph Schooling, when he started winning a lot of medals, it was this discussion like, is he really Singaporean? You know, and his father came forward and said, yeah, Schooling is actually a German surname. But we are Singaporean Eurasians, you know, and we are true blue Singaporeans. We've lived and grown up here. So so Joseph Schooling would be the most notable face. If you go back in history, you've got to talk about the man who held the highest office in the land, and that would be President Benjamin Sheares, our only Eurasian, second president of Singapore, and he held the office for 10 years. Yeah, so Benjamin Sheares. And we also share with students about a little bit about our Minister of Law during the in part of Lee Kuan Yew's cabinet. That would be Edmund Barker. Because quite a few thought that Edmund Barker might be British. You know, when we get our tour groups coming in, then we realize that they didn't know he was Singaporean Eurasian. Yeah, so he was the one who wrote the separation agreement. He also pushed very much for development of the national stadium, and because he was an avid sportsman. So we have a lot of avid sportsmen also in the Eurasian community, and even sporting families like the Tessenson family, the Clark family. They're well known for cricket, hockey, and we've got Olympians before Joe Schooling came on the scene. We have Eurasians who represented Singapore in the Olympics, didn't bring back a medal, but still were good enough to represent in the Olympics, like Mary Klaas. So she was a runner.
Even qualify for the Olympics.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
So moving on to that, like, you know, in the Katong-Joo Chiat district area, you know, the recent developments, and you know, in terms of like Eurasian culture in Katong-Joo Chiat districts, you know, are there any specific projects or efforts that have been successful in promoting the Eurasian culture in the district or the area?
Right. We have had some, for the Eurasian community itself, we've conducted bus tours, and they've also been like walking tours as well, where we would take groups around iconic places for our community and tell them the history behind it. So we've done some of those tours, and that was really fun to do because when you take people to the site itself and you tell them the story, it takes on a whole different meaning. And that's something that they will always remember when they pass by St. Pat's. They can remember what happened there, and different parts around the Katong-Joo Chiat area. So we'd love to do more of that as well.
Have you faced any challenges that your community has had in preserving your cultural heritage?
I think one of the things, maybe in preserving our cultural heritage, because our group, our community is so small. Furthermore, it's an aging population as well. A lot of Eurasians are also intermarrying with other ethnic groups. So, the Eurasian spirit is I wouldn't say diluted, but it's spread. So it is difficult to maintain. It can be challenging to maintain our heritage, but I think by having these tours and talks and inviting schools to come in, and I think that's a really good fertile ground for us to work on, schools and young children, to tell them about the Eurasian story, and that helps to maintain it. And I think within our own families, Eurasians ourselves, we have to tell our children our stories so that they can pass it on. It's very important that it starts from the family itself too.
History,
Yeah.
European period significance of
That's right.
group itself, right?
Yeah.
Following up on that question on challenges, are there any ongoing initiatives that you guys here at the Eurasian Association are doing to combat that?
Right, so it's important to preserve our heritage. So what we have been doing is we've been taking part in a lot of community projects as well, not just restricted to Katong-Joo Chiat. I mean, we have been taking part in the Chiating processions, in National Day, in different celebrations. So we have groups of dancers going out. So it is all these like community outreach. So it helps to get people interested in the community and hopefully get them to come to the Eurasian Heritage Gallery for a tour. One of the challenges we face is that many people do not know that the Eurasian Community House is located here. So to get the word out that we are here in the Katong-Joo Chiat area, because it's so special and meaningful to us as well. So a lot of outreach programs as well. I should also mention that to preserve our heritage, what we also have been doing is working together with the National Archives of Singapore, NAS, and they have this oral history interviews. So the Eurasian community has been doing that. It's really important to get those oral stories, those oral interviews before it's like forgotten or people pass on. So we've been actively doing that. And another project that we had was collecting family stories, so family histories, so tracing your family tree. So we've done a few family trees, so that's been really, it's been great because families then go and dig up and learn stories about their own family. So I did the family tree project as well, and it's wonderful because you kind of come together as a family and say like, what do we know about Grandpa? And what is the significance of this? Do we have any part of that, And then we found like my grandfather's pocket watch. And we're like, oh, this is really cool. Okay, what's the story behind it? So that everybody's trying to like, jog their memory. So it's a great way to preserve our own personal histories.
I think we just have one last question. Do you have any message you would like to share with youth of today and future generations on identifying our own heritage and identities?
Oh yeah, okay, sure. I think it really starts at home. So it's just like I was sharing with you about the family tree. It's a good place to start asking questions. We'd like to see, I hope that maybe young people will be a little bit more interested in like, start at home. What did Grandpa work as? What did Grandma do? What were their names? What was Grandma's name before she got married? So that's a good starting point where you look at your own family, and then you may be more interested to go further and research your own history. And hopefully also learn about the other communities in Singapore, because we are so closely knit in so many ways. Not just the Eurasian community, but all the other ethnic communities. There's a lot of intermarriage. There's a lot of sharing of certain customs and traditions. So as Singaporeans, it's a great start. Start talking about your own community, your own family, and then have an inquiring mind. Learn more about others. That openness and diversity, is kind of what kept our community alive. And we hope that we'll see more of it. Yeah.
So we really have much to learn from the Eurasian community.
I hope so. Please come for tours. We'd love to share our other stories.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Okay, my pleasure.